So as we are in part 4 of the Master Series with Leyendecker, I wanted to talk about the things I learned along the way. Now, they aren't, in a lot of cases, new things that I've learned along the way, but they're reinforcing fundamental things about painting. So at the same time as I was doing the Master Series for Leyendecker, I painted this painting, and I thought it was perfect because of the influence of doing that tutorial work was really obvious, but not until I sat back and thought about it. I think when I look at a painting like this, the things that I carry forward, while this painting is much more like a John Singer Sargent kind of painting, I love his figures in the rivers and figures in the grass and figures in nature, and the sort of highlighting and reflections off the light in the water here, and the rim lighting on the figure, and the big, bold brushstrokes that create the texture of the dress and the hair and the neck and the shadows and the highlights and everything in the background. All of this is like obviously more like John Singer Sargent. So if you've watched the Master Series with John Singer Sargent, you're going, yeah, I totally see it. But now, I guess I want to draw your attention to how the same principles are true, the same learnings are present in Leyendecker. So as an artist doing painting, brushwork is one of our biggest pieces. It's like biggest tools in our arsenal. So if we have all of this kind of brushwork, this is, maybe it doesn't look like Leyendecker, but do you see the dynamic kind of all angular mark making that's happening? I think this is sort of like crucial, because like if you're to think about, I love how you can just hold shift here and you can just draw a straight line. I love that. So I'm going to hold shift and just show you something. You've heard people say that, the rule of thirds, that you can create this, like, if you kind of tic-tac-toe grid your drawing, your painting, it's at these intersection points that you can kind of find your focal point, right? Where the focal point of the light or whatever can be there, the focal point of the figure or the dramatic action or whatever. That is a true helpful compositional device. But I think the most important thing is to remember that of all the thirds of your painting, whether it's the top, middle, bottom, right, left, or center, the most important third is all the thirds. You have to make every third of the painting equally interesting. And Leyendecker does that with his brushwork a lot of the times. A lot of the pieces he's done, the magazine requires there to be a lot of open and negative and empty space around the figures or whatever. And he activates and makes those spaces interesting with brushwork. And that's a lesson that can be learned whether you're painting, a reflective pond, a forest, a sky. It's the way in which you construct the brushstrokes. So you've got some going in every direction, right? You've got short, long, stubby, gently pressed. You've got brushstrokes going kind of in every direction. And that, all these dynamic pieces of brushstroke and the bristles and the texture, it all works together to create a very interesting background, so that even if you don't know what that is, it could be a pond, it could be reflecting light, it could be just some plants, it could be whatever. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that it's interesting to look at. And I think that's a lesson we can learn from Leyendecker, because a lot of his backgrounds are just white or just cream or just beige. Who cares, right? It's just as simple as it possibly could be. But he's making it interesting through the brushwork. And that's lesson number 1. Lesson number 2 is also present here, is that, do you see these like rimlet highlights that I've added? You can see them here, 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 and so on. they're all over the place. Now, Leyendecker would, for his more illustrative purposes, do what I just did right there. So let me go ahead and wipe all these marks off here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do kind of a Leyendecker style add-on. Oh, a little too long there. And we can kind of see how the difference between an illustrative approach in his style versus like a, you know, a more fine art approach, like in the John Singer Sargent style, they have a different function, right? But they're doing the same thing, which is to make the canvas interesting, to make the subject interesting. So you can come around and do this, and I'm intentionally creating a little bit different line thickness as I'm doing this to create even more visual punch, but you get the idea. If I start outlining it like this, it's flattening out the subject, it's making it way more graphic, it's really, really different in terms of feel. And I don't think it works for this painting. Like I don't like it, right? But the thing is it's important for two reasons. One is it helps you when you're thinking like he is about contouring and the outside edge of something. It makes you make sure that there's a lot of variety, right? So like, look here, this is a long edge, short edge, long edge, short edge, long edge, you know, medium edge. So there's a lot of different line lengths here, and that makes that interesting to look at, as opposed to just being kind of like, you know, one long line. Something else that you'll see sometimes artists would focus on is like when you're drawing a figure, you've got like one side of the figure is more interesting, got more detail, and then the other side is more just like simple, right? And so there's sometimes like a need to have some contrast between complexity and simplicity so that the eye has a place to both be interested and at rest. But either way you look at it, it's important to know what those contours and those edges are, and designing your characters within those spaces is crucial. And Leyendecker's approach really forces you to say, hey, I need to make this look interesting. I need that contour to be really vibrant. If it isn't, then what good will it be for me to highlight it and shadow it and bring all this attention to it if it's boring? So that's a thing. So I like that. Another thing, and let's just keep that there for a second on a separate layer. Another thing is just the idea of like overpainting, right? So like when I painted this painting, I put down a very kind of like a rust colored, like cream colored background. And then I put all this color work and brushwork over top of it, and you see still some of the sparkling, lighter color coming through, and you can see that just about everywhere. And the idea of that was I wanted the painting to be filled with this idea of light, just light reflecting, light permeating, light bouncing, light effusing into every little, you know, surface and substance. And that was an easy thing to do with just bold kind of like dry brushing on top of a lighter tone. And that's something that you can learn from Leyendecker too. Again, he's applying and using all of these techniques and tricks for his own devices and his own kind of like commercial art sort of approach, but it works. So I guess we've got our 1, 2, 3. Our number one is the importance of brushwork to activate empty, boring, simple, or minimalist spaces, right? So that can be huge, as you can see in all of these areas here. Thing number 2 is an awareness and sensitivity to the contours of objects and the importance of that when trying to construct anything that, you know, has to do with lighting. You know, you can exaggerate that lighting, or you can just capture what's truly there. Look at this nice rimlet arm, rimlet dress, etc. And we can draw it as it is, or we can exaggerate it and kind of use it for an extra visual punch. There's so many ways you could do this though, not just his way, right? So his way was to use that kind of like sepia or burnt umber and kind of like do a dark edge, dark line, and then come over it with like a white edge or a white line. And then you've got this super strong contrast. It's very interesting, right? It's a strong linear element next to a very like shaded, modulated gradient of form. So he's got line and form, value and edge, and all this stuff kind of coming together. But I think we can learn a lot from that, right? So like, that's just one way of doing it. What if, for example, your little technique, you come up with your little trick is that, say, you find this color, this kind of creamy peach color. So you're like, okay, what color is that? It's like over here somewhere, about like that color. Well, that color's opposite is going to be sort of like, if we know that the opposite of red is green, we know the opposite of like orange is blue. So you might get like kind of a blue-green color, right? So it's going to find one of those colors there. And then we can keep it kind of muted like these colors in here, but look at this. This is an interesting idea. Sometimes all an artist needs to do to find their own way and to kind of create their own style is they kind of exploit like an obvious and sometimes simple technique. Sometimes it's people using a unique brush at the end of their painting to create an interesting texture, right? Other times it's using a formal element and just kind of exaggerating it. You can do that. You can take inspiration from Leyendecker and do that in a circumstance like this. What if you take like the local color of this kind of the figure, say it's kind of like a warmish, kind of peachish orange. We're going to take its complementary color and we're just going to rim light the heck out of it. And then that's just kind of an interesting thing. You could try that. You could see where that gets you. It may not work with figure. What if it worked really well with still life? There's so many different ways you could do this that could be kind of interesting. Now, this painting in particular doesn't really lend itself to this kind of line work, but you could see how you could make it work. It would be kind of adding a very modern approach or a modern finishing to like a very traditional old school kind of approach to the painting. So this would be kind of a fun thing to explore, is to see what, you paint this very traditional painting and then you do this very graphic contour around it. It'd be interesting. I think that's the kind of thing you can learn from someone like Leyendecker is you can say, well, what can I learn from this? Where does this go? And then you can also play with things like, turn off pigment here, and you can go to overlay and see how it creates like these really interesting little looks there. Or you could go to like hard light and then it's there, but it's not there. It's like it's transparently there, but there's just stuff you can do. There's always stuff you can do. So I just wanted to show you that as an idea. But again, we have activation of spaces through brushwork. We have the kind of brushwork that lets the underpainting come through. And then we have the kind of use of maybe like an outline or a contour line to exaggerate the figure. And then, you could also get into, there's so much. But for now, let's just leave it there. And I want to move on to my next example. Okay, so let's go back to just the original image. So here we are with a ballerina. I had this photo that I thought would be just a good warm-up painting to do, and that's what I did. I did this while I was working extensively on the Leyendecker tutorial series, and I just did this sort of as a warm-up one day. I just thought, I just want to paint for me. I just want to have some fun. I just want to do something that, just as kind of fills my own curiosity. And you can see the hand was one of the things, surprisingly maybe, that I thought would be just really fun to paint, because you could just see kind of in the shadow, the fingers just kind of there, but very subtly there. Then here also on the back, I was very interested in how extreme of a gradient you have from your kind of bright light in the middle of the back and how that tapers off toward the shoulders. And you get this extreme
range of value from the edge of the shoulder to the middle of the back. And I know that seems maybe like not such an amazing thing. Like, why would that draw your eye? Well, why would the hand and why would the back and why would all of these sort of relationships between value, why would they grab my attention? Well, it just did. I think when I look at stuff, I don't think like, subject matter. I don't think, that's a house or a person. I think, oh, look at the values, or, oh, look at the colors. And so, you think of like the ear and the hair, and that whole area up there was also really interesting. You got the back of the ear, the subtle shading on the hair, the soft gradients. There's just a lot of neat things going on in this picture. It's nice, subtle lighting. And then I also thought that the dress laying kind of in this way that's so translucent and also kind of fluffy, and it just kind of sits there in a big mess. It just was very interesting to me. And I think that's great. I painted it. I like it. It's cool. But the problem is that, it's just a boring picture of a person in the middle of a room. So I thought, Leyendecker, he was the answer. So immediately taking a cue from his work that I was already working on all week and some other paintings, I immediately applied some of his strategies. And, him being a magazine cover illustrator in a large part of his career, there's oftentimes a narrative element in that. And so I thought what would make a nice narrative sort of context for this. And so I thought this person maybe after practice is sitting there, still in the ballet gear, and has got one eye looking over at shoes, another eye looking over at the books, or, maybe just they're on either side of her. And so maybe she's holding a letter. Maybe it's like an acceptance letter for college or for grad school or for something like that. And she's like, do I choose my passion or do I choose kind of like my academic purpose? And there's sort of like this duality there. And I thought that was kind of an interesting thing that came to mind. And then I thought, as long as I'm sticking with this kind of very, obvious kind of dull composition where you've got my centrally located primary character, and I've got these stripes and other techniques to activate the space, I thought, well, I might also, I might also try to style up the bottom third of the picture with some big brushstrokes and kind of make it seem more dramatic. But I don't know. I don't think that part really worked. So I'm going to erase that. And then the other thought I had was, if it is just this kind of like very centrally organized, very kind of like boring design, why don't I sell out to that, right? Like I already have her holding the letter. I have like the envelope on the floor from the university and, maybe the second page of the acceptance letter and then the shoes. And I've got maybe to put in some of the details there, the laces or the straps or whatever. Maybe I can put a title on the book. But aside from those things, I'm just going to, take that Leyendecker kind of big circle and plop that right in the middle and just sell out to this idea of a very, very sort of like centrally organized, formal balancing system where it's just very symmetrical. And so that was a Leyendecker gift. I think in my fine art brain, I would never think this is what I should do with this painting, but this worked. And I think it worked because the picture before I did any of this stuff was very boring. It was too obvious and it was too central and it was too boring. But here I'm able to take a lot of those principles and learnings from thinking kind of how another artist might, I guess, redesign or elaborate on or refine this picture. It was just such a fun technique. And I think that's the real gift of working in another artist's style is you can start with something kind of basic where you say, hey, I did an exercise and I worked on my technical side of my work. But then I can say, well, I also learned about the technical from Leyendecker, but I can now not just learn about the technical, I can learn about the design side. I can learn about the compositional strategies. I can learn about the narrative elements. I can learn about all kinds of things and different ways to even just approach my own work just by studying the work of another. And that's what's so cool about all this is we can kind of stand back and let art history flow past us and kind of pick and choose as if it's like a buffet bar from like the best restaurant in the world, right? We just get to have this little sample platter of things from everywhere, from all of our history. And it's really fun because every one of those things that we study in someone else's work, they're making our work better. And I think that that's partially also something I just have to mention Rebelle as a tool here because, when I started this sketch, it looked like one of Degas' kind of like bathers, like a woman kind of leaning forward and the kind of chalky mark making. I was like, gosh, it looks like a Degas. And then as I finished the painting, before I did any of the graphic elements, it looked like a sergeant. And then I add all these graphical elements. Now it looks like a Leyendecker. And I can have that whole spectrum of work. Like it's like walking down an art history lane, getting to see all of these different stylistic kind of approaches emerge just based on where I'm at within the painting process. And so, Rebelle can do all of that, whether it's oil paint or chalk or watercolor or pencil or ink or pen, or it's all there. And the toolkit is huge, and you can emulate and replicate all kinds of artists with this tool. And I just don't know how to be excited enough or how to share my enthusiasm enough for it, because it's mind-boggling. And so this is kind of, toward the end here, the last part of this master series with Leyendecker. And I hope that what you're gleaning from this is, not just that, you watch some guy do another paint along, or a speed paint, but that you start to think about, well, here's some strategies, here's some design elements, here's some compositional elements, here's some technical things, and how can I use those to make my work more interesting? And if we're doing that, we're having fun, we're learning, we're growing. And if we're working like that, we're in Rebelle, and that's the perfect tool to be doing that. It's just, there's so much in this software that you're never going to hit the ceiling of it. So I hope you had fun with this tutorial, this master series with Leyendecker. I sure did. And I hope you'll check out the next one coming soon. Please, like and subscribe, and please check out my channel also, and just keep painting. That's the most important part. We'll see you soon.